Please welcome Kyle Abraham and Jodee Nimerichter.
Thank you all very much for coming today. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm grateful to be asked. And it's just a pleasure to sit next to Kyle, because I think amazing artistic talent sort of just radiates out of him. So it's pretty phenomenal to be next to him. And as Aaron said, we're thrilled that we were able to present 2 of his pieces at ADF. And it was pretty extraordinary, because the first one was Radio Show. That was in the beautiful Reynolds Theater, where you will see his performance hopefully this Friday or Saturday. But it was such tremendous success that we invited him back the very next year, and he performed at DPAC and also received really incredible rave reviews. So I'm looking forward to the next opportunity to present him. But in the meantime, I thought it would be great to just go on a little bit of a journey. And I think for me, even though you can read a bio, to sort of understand who a person is and what they're doing and creating in the world, it's really good to go back to where it all began. So I think if you could just say, because it's much more interesting than reading it, if you can talk a little bit about where you grew up, your family, and what the environment all meant to you.
Sure. I should start by saying it's a real great pleasure to be here with you today, and to have this full week to get to be immersed in North Carolina, so that's exciting. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania originally, wear it on my sleeve. And my parents were educators, and my sister is as well, which is probably why I love getting to do as much outreach and community work as possible. But my parents were really supportive, trying to get my sister and I immersed in the arts in some capacity. We both studied piano at an early age. My sister, as I was telling you, had a voice, and I started playing cello really early on. And we both had private painting classes, which is kind of I don't know, kind of forward thinking in my mind for my parents with their background to have their children having private painting classes at Carnegie Mellon. When we're in elementary school. But, yeah. So that's a big part of the early stages. And dance, I didn't really find a way into dance until I was 17. I saw my first dance performance at age 16, the Joffrey Ballet doing Prince's Billboards, which I only went to because it was the music of Prince, who I just adored from day one. I think his first album was 1978, and I was born in 77, so maybe my sister might have been playing it in my crib or something for me.
That's great. So jump forward then a little bit. Music was so instrumental in who you were as a child, and it continues to be as an artist, but what was it that made you really pursue dance then?
Sure, I think there's this tricky thing happened where when I first saw the Joffrey Ballet, I went with some friends of mine from the rave scene. I was a big kind of party person in my high school years. We'd go out late at night. My parents, oddly enough, were okay with it because they knew where I was. So I could stay out until 3 a.m. because they knew that I wasn't doing anything crazy, just dancing all night. So when I went to that show and my friends saw how excited I was, they convinced me to audition for our high school musical that year. They were doing a Caribbean musical, and I had long hair because it was the 90s when I had my twists and the whole thing. So I auditioned for that musical, and they picked me as a dancer. And it's kind of been this thing of suggestion that has had me continuing to dance. So being cast as a dancer that year, they gave me a scholarship to learn more about dance over the summer at Civic Light Opera in Pittsburgh, and then the teacher there told me I should go to the Performing and Creative High School for the Arts in Pittsburgh. So my senior year, I went half day to one high school, Shenley High School, which is now gone, but it was also the high school that Andy Warhol attended, which is really exciting, claim to fame. And then went to Kappa the second half of the day, the Creative and Performing Arts High School. And the teachers there would then say, oh, you should look at the work of Garth Fagan, look at the work of Bill T. Jones. So I started looking at these choreographers' work, and I was like, oh my God, I love the way they move. I want to move like that. And this continuous thing of suggestion got me to go to college for dance. And I saw Bill T. Jones Art Design Dance Company in 1994 present Still Here at my high school. They did a lecture demonstration and then did a performance the following day in the city, and Bill also read from Last Night on Earth. And when I heard how articulate and how in-depth he was able to go in conversation with his artistry, I just found someone that I could look up to. And his dancers just owned who they were in such a way that when you're in high school, nobody's really, I think it's a real struggle for us to try and own who we are. But to just see this group of artists just be so comfortable in their skin, I just idolized them. So I started researching that company and realized that so many of the dancers had studied at SUNY Purchase. And that's a major part of the reason why I chose to go to Purchase for undergraduate school.
So for those of you that don't know, it's a very prestigious school, and you have to audition to get in, and incredible faculty members and exposure to a wide spectrum of people creating work in the field today. So you go there and you study dance, and then you graduate. You also went on to do a master's, and you've gone on to dance for David Dorfman's company and Bill T. Jones' company, and as an exquisite mover yourself.
Oh, thanks.
It's a pleasure. So if you haven't seen him, I hope you'll get to see him at some point on stage. But I'm curious, because you have so much of this amazing vocabulary in your body, what was the turning point for you to decide that you wanted to create work as opposed to just be dancing?
Right. Oddly enough, I never thought I was going to be a dancer. I think starting at 17, I just immediately thought I was going to be a choreographer. I made up dances in my room, like probably everyone here. But for me, studying dance was a way of learning so many more different ways to move. And I couldn't really do that in my room. It wasn't the biggest space. I had a big bed, which is awesome. But yeah, so that's what got me to dance class, was to try and learn more about movement and allow me space to be able to move. But I think I was always interested in being a choreographer. There were 4 years between undergrad and grad school where the first year out I did get to tour with Bill T briefly before quitting dancing for 2 years. I will skip that part of the story because maybe someone will make a Lifetime movie about what happened in those years in between. But it got me to go to graduate school at NYU. And that for me was figuring out if I wanted to be in New York again, because I had left after my brief stint as a dancer in a company. If I wanted to be a dancer, if I wanted to go back to actually realizing that choreography was my true passion there, but in a safer environment where I'm in school and I can kind of take it at my own pace, more or less. So it was definitely during that period, that's when we kind of gave the company a name, Abraham in Motion. I gave the name to the company when I was in my second year of graduate school, kind of trying to get the company more work outside of school.
So can you talk about the first piece you ever made that was performed to an audience?
For my company or for me?
For your company, actually.
Okay. Oh, Lord.
Beside your family, but on a stage.
Oh, yeah, no.
The real first performance that you were presented on a stage with your company.
4 feet.
4 feet. It could be small, though. It could be small.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. No, no, because I just think back to...
a professional gig, okay.
Yeah, I think about my silver unitard in my first solo. But the first group work I made, we performed at the White Wave Festival in Dumbo. It was a work, I think it was called Within Their Likeness of Being or something like that, which was a work I was making for grad school, just to make a work to present in a concert, but I applied to show that work on the outside. I think that might be the case for a company, but I did perform, my first solo I performed outside of school was part of the Dance Now Festival in 2000.
Okay, and then jump forward quite a bit to the radio show.
Right.
So that's the show that we presented at ADF in 2012. It was made in
2010 it premiered. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it is very personal. So can you talk a little bit about how that piece came about and sort of the narrative in terms of how you are grabbing the concepts for the pieces that you're wanting to make?
Sure. I should probably preface by saying that the radio show was the company's first full evening work, so really kind of changing the format that I'd been making work previously. I might have made a half evening work maybe for the company and a solo work for myself, so a program that might have spanned maybe a 20 to 25, maybe 30-minute work for the company and maybe 25 or even 5 minute solo for myself. So the radio show was the first time making a work that was to be around an hour or so in length with one primary idea. And that show was looking at my father, who had Alzheimer's and aphasia, and the only urban radio station that we had in Pittsburgh, WAMO, going off the air. So thinking about that as a major loss of a voice for community, and a way that we can connect with memory and memory associated with music. So that was a lot of the kind of jumping off points, but there was something safe in that for me because the abruptness that I wanted to kind of play with allowed me to create short movement sections. So I still was in somewhat of my comfort zone because I'm making these short excerpted ideas that could kind of have these quick synapse switches in a way that might correlate with how some people might perceive either a radio station going off the air or changing a frequency, or changing a frequency in someone's mind with Alzheimer's. So that's a big part of how that work came together. And a lot of the outreach components that we do, or a lot of the conversations that come up, address family and memory and community. How are you finding a support system, or how are you finding ways to talk about information that's really important to you, or what are your memories associated with the music you grew up listening to?
Okay. So there's an incredibly rich history with African American choreographers, and there's a lot of conversation, and ADF did many programs in the past about the narrative form in dance by African American choreographers. Some of those great choreographers that you probably all know, Tally Beatty, Donald McHale, Ilio Pomari, even Alvin Ailey. And I'm just curious if you can talk, do you feel that narrative is essential component in your choreography? Can the aesthetic of the movement be enough? Is the movement itself a narrative? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I think it's always a complex conversation because ironically, I think there are a lot of people who may come to dance for the first time and want to put a narrative on a work, or they struggle with that. They're like, I just didn't get it, as if you have to get something. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I think it's different schools of thought. But there's definitely maybe an internal story for myself that may not be in a linear format, that might have some kind of narrative threads. But I don't think it's important for me to have create a narrative in a kind of more structured story format. I do love the abstraction of, I think Ralph Lemon's work has a bit of narrative. He is, of course, a Black or African American choreographer, as is B.B. Miller, two choreographers whose work I'm definitely heavily influenced by. There is some kind of narrative there, but there's enough abstraction there that the work can be read on multiple layers, and that's something that I've been really interested in. And I think that's what you'll ideally get the sense of when you're watching the When the Wolves Came In program this weekend.
So many people in the media have said that your vocabulary is unique, refreshing, totally blown away this decade of something new. It's exciting. It's very personal. It's, I would say, most people don't say classical, but I think there's quite a bit of classical in there. Very modern with the urban included. I would be curious if you can describe what you think your aesthetic is, as opposed to me reading and thinking what I think it is. How would you describe it?
Sure. My wonderful booking agent, Sophie Martin-McCordy, she asks her artists to kind of answer that same question. How do you describe your work? And I always refer to it as a postmodern gumbo, because I'm definitely someone who's a big fan of the whole postmodern movement. And I definitely think a lot of what I'm influenced by comes from a lot of those qualities and ways of approaching movement and building a work. But it's a derivative of all the experiences I've had studying from different artists, either as a teacher-student relationship or just viewing a lot of work. When you go to a school like Purchase, we had teachers like Kevin Wynn, who's one of my biggest influences. We study Jose Limon technique, we study Martha Graham, Merce Cunningham. I had a lot of my ballet training both in that last year of high school and into college was all mostly Balanchine, which is kind of ironic doing the duet with Wendy. But that that's a big part of that movement pool. And starting dance so late, I just loved movement and loved learning about movement. So that's why it becomes this kind of pot of gumbo. It's just all stirring up in there, and it's all rooted in some ways when you bring in the word urban, because I'm someone that grew up in a really urban environment. So hip hop was, again, thinking about that Prince album, 78, hip hop to some folks might say 76, some people might say 78, again, born in 77. So it was heavily immersed in my experience growing up, but it was before it was kind of codified to a kind of dance class. So when we went out dancing, we might have been dancing to hip hop music and doing certain movements that were part of that experience, but that is just another way of looking at improvisation, which I've always found ironic that hip hop, for whatever reason, is never really, doesn't seem like it's brought much into the conversation about improvisation. Because a lot of the social dance, the rave that I was talking about earlier, all the rave experiences, all of that really helps to color what I do. So probably the root of the work is probably based in that social dance component, and then all of the elements that we're adding to it become the trainings of the Jose Limon, the Martha Grahams, the Cunninghams, the Trisha Browns, all that kind of stuff comes on top of that.
So let's go to the beginning of a new creation. You've made a lot of pieces now in a short amount of time. I'm curious if you could sort of walk us through your artistic process. You have this dense narrative in some respects. Are you thinking about the context of the pieces in terms of the narrative many years in advance, in the moment? How do the pieces evolve, and how do you get started?
Sure, it's a different process each time, really. There are some works that I might create maybe 2 years ahead of time. I'm starting that planning process. Some things might be a little bit more spontaneous if it's a solo for myself in particular. Sometimes I have an idea, but the physicalizing of that idea might not happen for a year to 2 years or several months after the actual work is conceived in some capacity. But I try to make sure that each process is a different process. The one thing that becomes a through line in the more recent works is something that I gathered from studying with Neil Greenberg as my composition teacher in college, where Neil videotapes himself doing a lot of improvisation and has his dancers learn those improvs, and that is then shaped and directed by Neil. So that's something that I found as a different entryway into getting to all the finite details and the phrasing that I'm most interested in. So that I employ in a lot of the process, but there's a work that actually hasn't been seen much. We premiered it at Jacob's Pillow in 2010, actually, a work called Opus 1, which is basically a work inspired by Edward Muybridge. So we're really just looking at his human figure studies, and I'll just maybe tell some of the dancers, maybe just give them a task, a simple task, and see if they can just pick up a piece of paper or just sit down and just kind of direct the human form doing everyday activities.
So he has extraordinary dancers. If you have not seen them, you're in for an amazing event again this week. Can you talk about your process for trying to identify the people you want to work with in the studio?
Oh, Lord.
First?
Well, that's tricky. Yeah, I'm very lucky. My dancers, collaborators I think they're otherworldly. But the one thing that I usually say is an openness. So even if they don't have that experience studying like a Graham or a Limon or any of those names I keep referring to, they have a willingness to learn the elements of those techniques that I'm most interested in. Everyone ideally is coming from a different movement background to a certain extent, but in a way that it all complements. Again, if I bring up that the idea of a gumbo, you don't want to have too much of the same. So you're really trying to figure out what you can add to that pot to make it all complement. So that's what we try and do. I think each dancer is pretty unique in how they live in the movement.
And can you talk about how you make the decisions of whether you will be in a piece or not be in a piece?
Oh, Lord. I think I'm still trying to figure that out. Yeah, I love dancing, but it's really tricky, I think, for me to not only get to performance, but also perform with other people. I don't know if I'm good at dancing with others. on a stage. Even when I'm at the club, I'm like, you know what? I see you over there, but I'm going to keep my space over here. I just like to just hide in the corner, but just to have fun and feel free. And that's kind of what I like to do on stage too. I just like to feel free. And when I'm dancing with other people, you really have to be responsible and responsive to what they're doing. I'm not trying to outshine, or I think you want to really have that rapport and conversation with whomever you're sharing the space with in any capacity. Although I guess some elements of social dance, there's that one-upping thing, but that's never been an interest of mine. But I hope I answered that question. Oh, no, I didn't. I think I'm still struggling with that. Again, the dancers are so capable that so many of the dancers in the company start taking on some of the roles that I am supposed to be doing. When you watch this weekend's performance, there's a trio called Hallowed, which is actually my favorite in the program. It's the most subtle work in the program, but it's I really like it. Really like the trio. But I was supposed to be in the trio, and then I had an injury this summer that we were maybe like a month before it premiered, so I wasn't able to get all of the unison work physicalized and gel with the dancers. So I just took myself out of that work and never put myself back in it. I think they do a brilliant job at it. And there's been several works like that. There's a new work called Absent Matter the company performs, where there's maybe a 6-minute solo in that work that I was originally making for myself and then 2 other dancers. But when I saw them do it, I was like, I'm not doing that. They do it much better than I ever would have been able to do it.
So Kyle is 30-something now.
Yeah, 38, I think.
38,
yeah.
Okay, 30-something.
Yeah.
You have been on the
37.
fast track of this trajectory in the dance field. I want to talk about it a little bit. He's received more accolades than probably anyone his contemporary. You've received numerous awards that come with great recognition and also a lot of them with monetary rewards. He has done this in a very short amount of time, where there's a lot of contemporary choreographers who could work their entire careers and never reach a quarter of that. And I think it's all incredibly deserved.
Oh, thanks.
But I'm just very curious how that has helped propel you as an artist, and also what has been the cost of that at such a quick speed. Maybe there's none. That would be terrific.
Oh, no. You know, I think I appreciate you saying that you feel that they are deserved, because I think that's a big thing that happens, is not feeling like you deserve any of these accolades, especially something like a MacArthur in particular, and knowing how few people in the dance community have received that award. And when I know that so many people I look up to haven't received it, I would mention them, but then it can come off weird if I do so. So it's really a complicated thing where doubt definitely plays a factor. I guess maybe, I think the smart thing to do, or the more uplifting thing to do, would maybe start with the negative and then end with the positive. So the one thing is, I think it's shown me there's a lot of people that may not feel that I deserve these accolades and have no problem telling me that. So I've grown a thicker skin much faster than I probably would have otherwise. And I think I'm having to question things about maybe where I should be going, maybe sooner than I need to, or would have needed to otherwise. But I actually, I think it's a good thing for me to be reassessing what I want to be doing and how I want to be doing it. And that's one of the greater things, I realized just last year, even though I'd already been into my 2nd year of MacArthur, I actually don't need to work with anyone that doesn't make me feel good in any capacity. Sometimes we work with collaborators in all aspects of life. Doesn't matter if you're a choreographer or what have you, could do any job, where you may work with someone because they're really good at their job, but they make you feel terrible about yourself. I don't have to work with those people anymore. And that's something that was really important for me to own, that I don't have to do that. I should be enjoying what I do. And so I've been trying to cultivate the right space for me to do that. So even going back to the question about how I choose dancers, I think now going forward, that is such a huge component that may not have existed for me before. Before it might have been, okay, who can do these steps the best? And that is so not important to me. It of course has to play some part, but ultimately I need to have collaborators. There needs to be that trust and respect in the space in any capacity, albeit our administrative team or artistic. So that's definitely one of the pluses. Another plus is making sure my student loans are taken care of, and I mean, it's real. It's real. You know, I have jokingly said, oddly enough, in David Dorfman's Disavow, there's a moment where I'm doing text with Carl Rogers where I actually said that I feel like my reparations should be my student loans taken care of. We were denied education for so long from this country that I feel like my student loans should be paid for. And I still believe that. I said it in the work. People laugh. You can laugh, you know. It's real. I really believe that. And I'm still paying that debt off. At this point, I could take care of that final payment, but I kind of, in hopes of building my credit, I've like tried to whittle it down in a really specific way. And people like Colleen Keegan that I was connected with from Creative Capital, once receiving Creative Capital funding and their support, really can help you with strategic planning. So coming in contact with people that can help me have a longer lifespan, either as an artist or just in general in life, are really important. And you start finding those people that don't ask you for anything other than how they can help you. I'm finding those people much easier now than I think I would have otherwise.
Great. So I've read a lot of things about you in addition to just talking to you, but one of the things that I felt is incredibly tender is that you said when you started out in this career, nobody told you how lonely being a choreographer is.
No.
Do you still feel that way?
You're trying to get me to cry, aren't you? Yeah, I definitely feel that way. I think I've never felt so alone ever in my life. I mean, granted, my father's gone, but my life is just different. I'm just, I feel very alone. I'm trying to figure out how I can make a support system, but I also have to find the space. That's one of those balances of, you know, the company is touring so much, which is so wonderful, but it just means that it's that much harder for me to actually cultivate any kind of support system. So it's a challenge, to say the least.
Okay, so in this lonely world that you may live,
Yes.
you all are also incredibly blessed by making these magnificent works that utilize some of the most talented collaborators, visually, musicians, composers. Can you talk sort of about the work that came out of your maybe 2-year residency at New York Live Arts, which was really a time of incredible creative output, how you came up with the content for what you wanted to work, because those are very rooted in history, and then how you chose to work with the collaborators that you did, and then we'll sort of get to the piece that you're going to do here this week.
Sure. You know, it's kind of ironic because even with that, there's this whole other thing which didn't get discussed much about that process, right? So over those years, 2012 to 2014 even comes up when we were talking about the casting and how much the casting might have shifted within my company. We had a turnover of 7 out of 9 people working with the company during that 2-year time span, which is kind of crazy. But that residency allowed me so many opportunities to not only be making on my work, but they helped me to find my collaborators. I was really interested in working with Glenn Ligon, the visual artist who I'm really just in love with. I think he's the best person in the world, maybe besides from David Dorfman. But working with Glenn has been really, really wonderful experience. So I should go back and preface about the work. So when I was given the commission with New York Live Arts to be their resident commission artist, I presented them a series of ideas, one of them being creating a work inspired by Max Roach's We Insist Freedom Now suite. I'm a big jazz fan and have been my whole life. But it was, at that time, we were getting close to what would have been just now the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. So trying to address a work that's looking at what's changed, what hasn't, how are we talking about the subject matter, And even diving even further into what that Roach album was addressing was also looking at apartheid in South Africa and, of course, the civil rights movement of that time period. And wanting to really expand upon the company's work and trying to really build a repertory, I decided to make 2 different programs. One, an evening length work, which was called The Watershed, where Glenn Ligon was one of my key collaborators along with my dancers as collaborators. And then a companion suite of works, which is what we were showing here this weekend, When the Wolves Came In. All 4 of those works were using the same subject matter, using that Max Roach album as a jumping off point, but trying to find different ways to approach the subject matter. So when we go through this weekend's program, you start first with the title work, When the Wolves Came In, which to me is a work looking at perception. So when you're watching this work, actually, oddly enough, maybe it's strategic, but it's a work that I think works best when you see the work, we talk about it and you see it again, because what comes up for people when we talk about it, I guess I'll be open and just say this now, what comes up for people is we see what we want to see, right? So there are moments in that dance where a white man may be lifting a black woman. There's also moments when a black woman might be lifting a white man. But based on how we're seeing it, you may only really remember one of those 2 things happening. The work is actually set up in some ways in the reverse of how we usually think about race in this country. The second work, Hallowed, is a trio that's set to, I should also say, I guess, When the Wolves Came In is set to the Los Angeles Massacre performing Nico Muhly's A Good Understanding. The next work, the trio, Hallowed, is a trio that's set to gospel hymns that were synonymous during the 60s and civil rights era. The work for me has this bubbling up in it. It's a really subtle work, as I was saying earlier. But for me, it's a work that is referencing this time when even if you saw someone that you knew that was lynched, you didn't want to react, because if you reacted, then that may either mean you knew who was hanging the person that you knew and or loved, or you're just fearful that you may meet that fate in some way. So there's a really subtle bubbling up of emotion and just emotion, I guess, throughout that work. And then the third work is The Gettin', which actually uses that Max Roach score, but reinterpreted by one of my other key collaborators, Robert Glasper, who I need to see if he won a Grammy last night. I don't know if he won again last night, but he's won numerous years in the past. But Robert reimagined that Roach score. A lot of it keeps a lot of the essence of what that album was. We might have flipped some of the songs in different order. One piece in particular, a duet that's in that program, also uses Drum Also Waltzes, which is from a different Roach album, but I brought that in because before I knew what Robert was going to do, I knew that something about the essence of that song connected me with Robert's vibe. So it just winded up staying in. It had a kind of coolness and a tension and a kind of underlying thing in it, but overall, The Gettin' allows for the scream and physical shaking that Hallowed wasn't allowed to have. So that is primarily how this program comes together. It also involves one of my key collaborators, Dan Scully, who served as my lighting designer for the past 10 years. And he's really used light in a really interesting way, lighting and video collaborator in this project. He's used both in a really exciting and subtle way at times. There's moments where I'm not giving anything away, but I can just say that there are lights in Hallowed where you'll see a little, maybe a little piece of paper this big on each lamp, but those are actually images of people who were lynched or burned alive. You won't see them that close, but they're hanging from those lamps. So he was really keyed in on the work when collaborating with us, and has been for the last 10 years.
guys, the other two collaborators, the visual artist and your musician, how did you find them, or how did you guys connect?
Yeah, so New York Live Arts really helped me to get both Glenn on board and Robert on board. One of the former staff members at Live Arts, Danielle, she was a big jazz fan as well, but she used to work at Jazz Lincoln Center, now is back at Jazz Lincoln Center, but she helped connect me with Robert and Robert's manager, Nicole Hegman, and they flew me out to LA, which is awesome. Flew out to LA and met with Robert, and before we even started talking about the project, we're talking about our love for Brandy. She's my favorite singer, and just shooting the conversation. I was like, oh, you know what, you need to collaborate with this person. He's like, oh yeah, I should. So just having that kind of conversation was exciting, and we knew that we really got on well, and after we set that up, we talked about how we could best collaborate. And Glenn was good friends with one of the board members at New York Live Arts. So they invited Glenn to come and watch my work another night that I made for the Ailey Company for 2012. And then we went out to dinner and talked about collaborating in any capacity. And he's come on board for that project. He's on board for my next project and has now joined my board. So it's been really, really great. I think he just really cares deeply about my work and wanting me to succeed. And that's, again, one of those people that I'm trying to just keep around me as much as possible.
Just really briefly, can you talk about how much you allow the collaboration on those elements to happen, or how much full reign you give them to create what they think would work best with the dance you're making?
Oh, sure. I don't know, maybe I guess that maybe that one is so easy because Glenn was with us more or less from day one, and he always gave me great feedback. I never said no to any of the collaborators. Yeah, I think the only thing that was a conversation between me and Glenn trying to go back and forth on was which set served which piece best, whether it was the watershed, using these wood panels, these kind of different textured wood panels, and this tree made from, what do you call it, PVC piping, and hunting suits made for children, which is kind of ironic. Those are the leaves, or the backdrop that you'll see in When the Wolves Came In, which is actually, I guess, I don't think it does anything to say what it is, but it's an image from a Klan rally, but the way that it's exposed, you won't see that right away. Either time, we weren't sure which was going to serve which other program best, but I think clearly I like to talk. So we just had a lot of conversations, all the collaborators and myself, and with Robert, I said, oh, I'd love a cakewalk in here at some point, and he's like, sure. So he just starts playing one, and you hear that in that score as well. So.
I think we're going to open it up for questions. If any of you would like to ask something that you are dying to know about that I haven't asked, please.
Brandy's new single, Begging and Pleading, available on iTunes. Yeah.
Kyle, what are you doing on Thursday night for dinner? No.
I know, yeah.
If anybody has any questions you'd like to know about him or his work, Aaron.
So I guess my question is about, so you started by talking about Bill T and Bill's sort of hyper-articulateness, and I wonder whether him as kind of this dominant figure in dance, and in particular black dance, like what sort of challenges does someone like that or create for an artist such as yourself?
I think that's a great question. I think the great challenge is actually one that allows for me, and ideally any other artist, to really think about even more what their mission is in their work, and how they're really owning who they are and not trying to be anyone else. When I'm casting my dancers, there are definitely moments where I was like, oh, well, if I cast that dancer, it may make this company look like I'm trying to be Bill T. Jones too, or something, which I'm not. But he's definitely someone that I've been inspired by. But in the same way, that's where becomes a really tricky thing when we're looking at race. But when I think about all of my inspirations, I think Bill has become such a wonderfully celebrated celebrity in our field. But the work of Ralph Lemon is actually my ultimate hero. again, another black choreographer, but he can do no wrong. He's a brilliant writer, brilliant visual artist, brilliant dance maker and performer, and the most honest artist I've ever seen and ever encountered. Oddly enough, I just had a conversation with David Rousseff just several days ago, getting his feedback and advice on how to just survive, really, in this world as an artist. And he's someone whose work I've looked up to for years, much more abstract than some of the other artists maybe mentioned. But I don't know. It's tricky. I love Cunningham's work so much, and it's played a huge role on the work that I make. Clearly not in a theatrical way, because there isn't any. But when you look at a work of Cunningham's like Duets, and he may say it's not about anything, clearly when you're watching that work, you know that work was about, it was really dealing with these different couples. There's so many different types of duets that happen. This is of course, my take on that. But I love how that can be my take on it, and someone else can just look at form and just look at entrances, exits, and color. Maybe not this kind of color, because we know there's only maybe a brother or two and they're never a sister. So that's a whole other conversation. But I love that. I love how many possibilities can come up. But going back to the question at hand, I think it really makes me think more about who I am and how I want to be as a figure in the dance community. And I can stay inspired by and call upon artists like Bill T. Jones, who had dinner with he and Bjorn right after the Christmas holiday. And it's just great to see what's possible. I hope it's still possible. Granted, his career started at a different point in not only our funding, but in just this country in general. But it's great to admire and to dream. And people like Bill T. and Ralph and BB and everyone, even people in my own age bracket of like a Phaedra School or Camille Brown, help me to think about what's possible.
Any other questions?
I saw a hand over here.
Yeah, actually sort of maybe continuing about the mission or sort of impetus for your work, and you spoke about reparations in a kind of material sense, but I'm curious about how you think about debt and justice in the emotional or affective or immaterial world of the dance work that you create.
The dance work? Oh Lord.
If you do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have to, right? I think there's a responsibility that comes up, again, oddly enough, this comes up with a conversation that I had with Bill T. Jones, maybe while I was still in residence, was just thinking about what it means to have a black body in space. I think I know we're still in a place in this country where I have a certain responsibility that maybe, I do say maybe, my white counterparts may not feel as if they have when it comes to having a black body in the space. I don't know, because I'm not a white artist. I can just, and there's so many of us, all black artists, white artists, Asian artists, artists of color, etc., that this conversation is a larger conversation. I think the other thing that has to happen is we have to all own our, kind of identify our perception of our percentage of privilege, right? Because everyone has some kind of privilege. Even me saying that I'm a black, gay, American man, each one of those things has a certain element of privilege that goes with it. I can't live the same life I'm living here if I was living maybe in Uganda, where I could be murdered for my sexual orientation. I'm a man, so there's advantages there, so to speak, right? So there's all these things that come up, and how we own those things, albeit on stage or in our personal life, it will kind of correlate, and it does, I feel like it does so for me in the work that I create and in working with my collaborators. These are conversations that we have when we're in process, after performance, in a performance. I think the one thing that I ask for my dancers and collaborators each show is that we are present. Be present in who you are, how you are, and what you think you are. I think that it's really important to do that when you are kind of being as vulnerable as we are asked to be as people on a stage. So hopefully that answers it in some way. Okay.
Any other questions? I have a question really quick. What do you enjoy most about being a choreographer?
I enjoy the freedom that I can have when I'm in my own space being a choreographer. I think there's a lot of things I'm still struggling with now, especially the amount of exposure, which has its pluses and minuses. But I love what creativity can bring, and I love the fact that I have a group of artists around me that we can conversate in some capacity, and I can do that as a choreographer. I don't know if I would be able to do that necessarily in some of the other interests I have in the same way, but that's one of the advantages at the moment.
And what is your next project?
The next project, it's called Dearest Home. It won't premiere until May of 2017 at Yerba Buena, but it's about love. I wanted to switch it up because everything had this darkness to it, and anger and frustration. It's kind of ironic because I had a big breakup this past year. But again, thinking about the timeliness of trying to plan to work 2 years out, this project was already stirring for me before that happened. So this work is probably going to be a dark, depressing work, but but it'll be a work about love. So, yeah.
I can't wait to see it. It sounds like it's a good premiere date.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk.
Yeah.
Sounds very good. Anybody else want to say anything? I hope that you will all get to see the performances on Friday and Saturday. I think we're in for a really wonderful treat, and I think it's interesting to think about the responsibility that one might walk away from seeing the piece in terms of how you interpret what you see, because sort of the magic of the collaborators coming together to fulfill maybe a deeper meaning to the work. One can also go in and just truly appreciate the aesthetic of the movement, and I think it's actually breathtaking, and it's a rare opportunity to see someone at this level constantly creating work and getting to refine some of the context and subject matter that is so tender and important to you, and what it does mean to you as a young black gay man. So especially as a white woman, to sit and watch it, it's very important to think about all the implications.
Oh, thanks.
So thank you all for coming today. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Produced by Duke University, online at duke.edu.